In my last video on the Chinese mobile version of Enter the Gungeon, I discussed the possibility of going over some of the things I found laying around in the assets of the port. This is actually my second attempt at making this video. Had a whole other script written and recorded when Devolver decided to be so inconsiderate as to release the international mobile version and render the whole framing of the video obsolete. So, take two. Let's go. This video is going to go over cut content I unearthed in the Chinese and international mobile versions. If anything is unique to one version, I'll make note of it. For a breakdown of what these ports actually are and how they play, I'd recommend watching my previous videos on them. This one will assume you either know about the port or don't care and just want to listen to some rambling. I'll also say, the way in which I'm able to extract assets from the APKs of the ports doesn't always preserve the sprite names, so we won't always have much context on what certain things are supposed to be. You'll just have to bear with me as I work with what we have. Without any further ado, let's just jump into the little secrets I found nestled inside of the assets of the mobile ports of Enter the Gungeon. Starting off gently, this first example requires a little context. You see, boss room doors and explosive barrels used to have much cruder, less refined sprites in pre-alpha versions of Enter the Gungeon. Those sprites for the early barrels and boss doors still exist in the assets of Enter the Gungeon to this day as an unused remnant. This is in the international PC and console releases as well, and isn't necessarily remarkable. However, if you remember, the explosive barrels and boss room doors are censored with new sprites in the Chinese mobile version, to remove skull iconography. Apparently, whatever intern they handed this task of censorship to was not given any context about what environmental sprites are actually used and what ones aren't, because these unused pre-alpha textures have also been modified in the assets of the port. This leaves us with new versions of sprites we haven't seen since before version 1.0, like the crunchy, crusty boss door turned into a helmet. Another example of simultaneous carelessness melded with paradoxical effort, because this did take someone time to do, but they didn't care enough to actually check if the work they were doing was at all necessary. This same environmental collection in the international PC and console version also contains an unused boss foyer mat, resembling a bird skull, perhaps for the Gatling gun. On its own, this mat simply hints that Dodge Roll at one point may have been planning to implement different entry mats for each boss, but this idea fell through. Yet again, whatever poor sap they had on censorship duty apparently didn't know that this mat wasn't used, because the Chinese mobile version also censors it into a much narrower helmet mat. These changes are reverted in the international release, presumably because they just swapped the whole sprite atlas back to the original version. Another example of reworking things that already existed can be found if we look at the player characters. Every Gungeoneer has an alt skin unlocked after killing the past, we all know that. Most of you are probably also aware that in the Enter the Gungeon spin-off Exit the Gungeon, characters have both B skins and extra C skins. The pilot's C skin is based on his friend Zed from the past, the Marines is styled after Voidcore weaponry, the Hunters is based on the Good Hunter, the protagonist of Bloodborne, the Convicts is based on the last human from the Robot's past, the Robots is styled after the steampunk aesthetic, the Bullets is based on Link's classic outfit in the Legend of Zelda franchise, and the Cultists it's a ninja cosplay that Naruto runs. As the Gunslinger and Paradox aren't present in Exit the Gungeon, they have no C skins, and no B skins to begin with anyways, so we can ignore them for now. Why am I bringing all this up? Well, all of these tertiary character skins are present in the assets of the mobile versions, with some modifications to make up for the missing directional animations. The Breach Sprite Collection also contains additional assets for interactable objects corresponding to each skin, just like how the original B skins require you to actively put those clothes on in the Breach. We see a blue feather representing Zed's blue plumage, the helmet of the Voidcore set, the hat of the Old Blood Hunter outfit, the Last Human's jumpsuit, the Steambot's head, a green slug-shaped cap, and the Cultist's neatly folded cosplay. This pretty much confirms that at some point in development, there were plans to backport the XTG skins into the mobile version, but it was either never finished or canned. Now, the introduction of new cosmetics into a mobile game might be ringing some alarm bells for those of you in the audience with a couple lobes you can rub together for warmth, and I'm afraid to say, those fears are not unfounded. Take, for example, this asset of a big bag of money. The asset name? Shop. Yeah. A lot of the unused assets I found seem to be for a microtransaction shop. There's this texture called skin background, icons for gems, locks, keys, and open and closed treasure chests, which are all classic microtransaction iconography. Border sprites for skin selection UI exist as well as icons for most Gungeoneers and their alt skins. Even characters that don't currently have any alt skins, like the Gunslinger, are included, but sadly no Paradox. The Lamb is also here, and, curiously, so is Lamey. Just the alt skin, however, not her default. For those unaware, Lamey is a Gungeoneer that was cut from Enter the Gungeon and later recanonized as the Detective in Enter the Gungeon House of the Gundead. She has a blue-haired alt skin, which is represented among the skin collection here in the mobile version. All of this pretty clearly spells out that those skins from earlier were intended to be for sale, for real, cold, hard cash. Really cementing that mobile game smell. Now, dodge roll is fairly hands-off on the port, with most of the port work being done by Chinese company Zhendong, or XD, so I'm fairly certain a lot of this is their doing, given dodge roll's traditional commitment to supporting Enter the Gungeon as a one-time purchase, and even including a gun to mock the kind of microtransactions this implies. Devolver reps have publicly stated multiple times that Enter the Gungeon on mobile will not have microtransactions, so I'm not sure how much they knew about this in the lead up to the game's release. I'd wager it's possible they're the ones who put the kibosh on this chicanery, but when I reached out at the time of discovering this, which was shortly after the Chinese version released, they declined to comment. So after this section was already recorded and in the middle of being edited, I reached out to Devolver again, and actually got a response this time. Seems that the official Devolver position is that they had no idea these assets existed in the files at all. Additionally, Modkick, the Devolver employee I spoke to, raised the idea that they might have been from an unused or rejected pitch, which I think is worth considering. Given what they've since stated publicly, I don't think there's any risk of this shop ever reappearing in future updates, but it is a little strange that these assets were ever made in the first place. Moving on from the microtransaction shop, but still on the topic of skins, there's a collection of what look to be new starter gun skins to match the Exit the Gungeon costumes. Some of these skins have more work done on them than others, but for once I can actually see most of their names, as most of them have separate UI sprites which are actually labelled. The Friend skin, spelled with a 3 instead of an IE, appears to be a longer red version of the Rogue Special, that glows blue rather than green while firing. This likely ties into the fact that the pilot's C skin is his friend Zed, implying that they have matching guns. The use of a 3 instead of an IE matches the internal name of the Rogue Special, the Knave. This gun isn't named, but it pretty clearly seems to be a Void Core reskin of the Marine sidearm, to match the Marine's Void Core skin. There's this gun, called Hunter Sidearm, which, it pretty clearly relates to the Old Blood skin for the Hunter, but I'm not sure what it's specifically supposed to be. Maybe someone will know in the comments. There's the Budget M1911, whose name pretty blatantly matches it with the Convict's Last Human skin. The Steambot Gunhand is unmistakably the robot's, pairing with his Steambot alt skin. It's just a metal finger gun that actually shoots. And this one took me a hot minute to realise, but the Ninja Star has to be an alt skin for the Dart Gun to match the Cultist. There's obviously no alt gun skin for the Gunslinger because he has no alt skin to pull from, and interestingly, I wasn't able to find a C-skin version of Blasphemy either. Maybe it's buried too deep, or one was just never made. In more unused UI, there's these tabs depicting various Gungeoneers. Looks like they're part of some menu for switching between characters, possibly related to the skin shop from earlier. The main 4 are represented, plus the Bullet, Robot, and Gunslinger. The Cultist is also included, but is using the wrong boss card. Instead of using their up-to-date purple-robed boss card, they're using the old grey one for some reason. Lamey is included again, and is accompanied by the Cosmonaut, using that same boss card that we saw for the first time in the trailer for the port. There's also a tab for the Ninja, another unused Gungeoneer whose boss card has never been seen before. We only see a sliver of it in this tab, but it looks solid, and it drives me mad that we can't see the full thing. Believe me, I've scoured the files. And last but not least, there's a tab for the Resourceful Rat, using an old boss card for his unused boss fight prior to Advanced Gungeons and Dragons. This one is perhaps more perplexing because outside of the Resourceful Indeed synergy, the rat is not a Gungeoneer. Perhaps this hints at some far-off plan for an independent Resourceful Rat Gungeoneer, or maybe more likely, it's the result of a mistake, some intern not realizing that the Resourceful Indeed skin is a transformation rather than a Gungeoneer in its own right. Alright, that's the heftiest stuff out of the way. From here on out, we're going to be shotgunning through all the loose stuff I found. No real segue, let's do it. An unused bag button, probably for the player's inventory, and bag UI, whatever that means. There's these tabs, which resemble the icons used on user profiles to show what items, guns, and enemies have been revealed in the Ammonomicon. The helmet tab is labelled Characters, the hockey mask is labelled Skins, and the trophy is labelled Achievements, all pretty self-explanatory. There's this sprite repeated a few times, which I think is labelled Empty Shell, and might be being used as a placeholder. When watching my original video on the Chinese port, you may have noticed that the basic on-screen control buttons looked kinda bad. Crunchy and sharp, like placeholder icons that were never meant to get out of beta. Apparently, that's not mean to say, because assets of the game contain some really nice-looking smooth button icons for reloading, shooting, and rolling, which are just never utilized. I also found these icons, drawn in the same style as the base game's challenge mode modifiers, and organized alongside them. There's 25 of them total, but their file names just list them with numbers, so we can only really glean information about them from the icons themselves. Assuming that these are intended to be a sort of challenge mode expansion, I can recognize some symbols related to reloading, Pac-Man, what might be the smiley from Minesweeper, something ammo related, etc. Feel free to speculate on this below. Unfortunately, I have nothing more on these icons in particular. Next up, there's a couple new, what look to be, sprites for NPCs. Unfortunately, they're just sprites, and like everything else, we have to speculate as to their names. This first guy is pretty clearly a merchant of some kind, same species as a Gunham. I hope it isn't rude to say, he looks pretty microtransaction-y. Then there's this, door. Yeah, no clue. Other than having a handle, it's just a brown monolith with a smiley face. Do with that what you will. There's this UI icon for something called the Remington Off, some sort of sawed-off Remington, but it doesn't actually look like any Remington I've seen. Its association with the sawed-off implied to me that perhaps it's an alt skin, but that would be the first alt skin for a non-infinite ammo starter if true. This sprite atlas looks to contain animations for the entrance to the Keep of the Leadlord slowly unsealing, coupled with the same bejeweled key from earlier. This smells very microtransaction-y to me. And last, but certainly not least, I found these debug buttons for enabling and disabling guard mode, probably for debugging. I bring them up because it's weird to me that there's two different designs, as if they had to go back and redesign a dev button that the end user will never see. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed raking through the loose and unsorted refuse that the mobile versions have brought to this already messy game. See ya!